We're good.
Good morning, everybody. It is February the 18th of 2020, except if you're in Australia, in which case that's a lie because it is February the 19th. We don't talk about that. This is the community call for February 18th. Yeah, let's get started with a few. My name is David. I'm on the call. We have Steve, Michael, James, and Nick, I see, also from VMware. If there's anybody else who wants to just jump on and introduce yourself, and perhaps especially talk about how you came across this project and what you're hoping to get out of Contour, that would also be really useful.
This is Daniel Hansen with Red Hat. I am involved in the service APIs project, and have been working with a lot of the folks on the call here, and just trying to better understand Contour and hopefully start getting involved as it relates to service APIs, and then beyond that, after we get over the service APIs hurdle.
Cool, great. Yes, we have much to talk about in service API land. Is there anybody else?
Hi, this is Micaiah DeShiel Butler Masters, also from Red Hat and also interested in service APIs. Cool,
welcome. Thanks for coming on. Okay, let's go through some of the more formal agenda, and then we'll open it up a little bit. Contour releases. We are planning to do Contour 1.2 release this Friday, where Friday is relative to the local understanding Friday. There are this is effectively trying to keep with kind of a monthly cadence. So basically, stuff that's in master, we're going to call it 1.2, so you can have a supported release and get out there and use it. Some of the I might throw it over to James and Steve and Nick, who, to be honest, did most of this work while I was traveling, to point out anything that I missed. But the things that I know for Contour 1.2 are going to be Envoy 1.13. When we did 1.1, we were slightly out of phase with the 1.13 release. Like, it's always they're on a kind of 90-day release cadence, and we're on a roughly 4 to 5 week release cadence. So there's always some time we fall out of phase there. So that addresses that. There's been a lot of internal work, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later in the call related to service APIs, but basic. But one of the things to realize, whoever's sharing the screen, if you just click on the words where it says compatibility implications, is that we've upgraded the Kubernetes client to 1.17. This is, Steve, this is so we can have the dynamic client, correct? Yes?
I think so. And I did the PR. Yeah, there was some things in there that helped us. I think part of it was just bumping it to keep current with latest.
Yeah, so there's a bit of kind of like prior art here, which is when every development release, when we open the tree, one of the first things I do is just go and see if any of our dependencies need to be updated. So we would generally keep up to date with the whatever was the latest Kubernetes client, without being too hyper aggressive. In general, this shouldn't have a big impact on users, like partially because we've been doing this for the last 2 years. If you didn't notice a problem before, there's probably no problem now. But technically, because the Kubernetes client only really supports the versions of Kubernetes that are supported, effectively we have kind of moved the Kubernetes support window. Can someone go to the Project Contour website and our Kubernetes support page? It's under, yep. Nope, the other one. Yep. And yep, docs, and then down on the left-hand side. So we Kubernetes support matrix. Yep. So what we want to do in the future is at least give you some ideas of what Kubernetes versions are supported by Contour. And this is kind of like a two-dimensional problem, because as Contour moves forward in time and Kubernetes moves forward in time as well, there are versions of Kubernetes that aren't supported. Yeah, probably I'm speaking too long about something which is not really an issue, but it is just kind of like if you have processes inside your company which are like, well, we're on Kubernetes version X and it's the tool version Y, like you might need to solve that compatibility kind of multi-dimensional chess. This page can hopefully help you, and over time it will grow just like the supported Envoy version page. the main driver for this is we needed a newer client to work with the dynamic client, which would give us access to service APIs, types. So it all kind of comes back to service APIs. Any questions? I'm guessing Dane and Mikhail. This is pretty standard stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I missed the first part of it. 118 support, is that planned for the next Contour release?
So that's really a question. Like this table is driven by what the client says. Now, the client, like what the client promises and what it actually works with are two different things. The client promises basically this, like if someone clicks on that client-go link, second paragraph, yep, this one here, like this is, if you use client X, these are the things you're compatible with. In reality, that table is much bigger. As long as you're not trying to use new features like new data types or new keys on classic core Kubernetes objects, client works all the way back to like year dot. So there is this difficult thing between the client officially supports certain Kubernetes versions and actually works with much larger set. We have to go with what it officially supports. But
it's important to remember, Dave, it's important to remember that the officially supported actually means is tested against.
Correct.
So that's the other important discriminator there, is that means that those clients are all tested against those versions. We have found that because we're generally using versions like reasonably core objects like Secret and Ingress that haven't changed in a long time, it hasn't actually mattered. That will actually change at some point, because at some point we're going to need to move the Contour HTTP proxy CRD to the GA CRD spec. Once we do that, then we do put a hard limit on 116, because that was when about 114 or 116 was when the GA CRD spec first came in. And once we change our CRDs to that, it won't work unless you're running on. That will be the minimum version. And we do need to do that for reasons.
Yep. So I'll take a note to update this page for 118, get an answer for 118. But the other thing to take away from this is over time, when older versions are not supported, they're not supported because we require new features. Updated CRD. Remember a couple of releases ago when Kubernetes extensions moved to networking.k8.io. So it's those things that in the client drive our compatibility, not the product itself. It's the libraries we build upon.
Yeah, thanks. I'm following you now.
Cool. Thanks. I probably spoke too long on that and made too much of a deal out of a small thing. Some other things before I throw it over to Steve, James, and Nix. Service protocol schema validation. In 1.1, we added the ability, we added a much better way of saying what is the protocol this supports rather than the annotation on the service document, which everybody hated. We've now added a field to say in HTTP proxy, when you talk to the service, it expects this protocol. That's now validated, I believe, through a validation from the CRD. Like we just published an enumeration of valid values. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Steve
right.
did this work. Yep. So
yep.
If you reapply the CRD definitions when 1.20 is out, now all of a sudden you won't be able to give the wrong enumerations. Yep.
I'm in the wrong spot, so ignore me. I thought I could find it quickly.
No, you were right there. There was like an annotation of the.
Oh, you're right. Okay, I was
Yeah. We can go and look at the YAML as well, but it's actually kind of easier this way.
Yeah.
So you can see there on line 203. We now make it clear to the generated CRD and thus to kube control. These are the valid values for this field. So just another thing to try and make it easier, because otherwise, if you had an invalid value, it would just be either ignored or the whole document would be considered invalid. So this just helps get you validation earlier in the process. helps give you better feedback.
Yeah, we had bad docs too as well that pointed you to a different value.
Yeah.
So that didn't help anything.
That didn't help either.
Yeah.
Now, tcpproxy health check support. It's another one of yours, Steve.
Yeah, so when we migrated over from Ingress route, there were some things about health checks that we kind of rethought. So at one point we took out all the health checks and then re-implemented them into this health check policy, which we've been kind of following throughout. And I think in our 1.0 finish to get that complete, we overlooked adding the health checks back to TCP proxies. So that is now in there, and will be in there, I guess, in 1.2. So you can define the same active health checks against a proxy.
Yeah, but back in the pre 1.0 days, we had the same stands, the same health check stands, which we applied for both TCP proxy and HTTP kind of endpoints. Turns out there's a bunch of fields in there, like path and query and host, that don't make any sense when you're talking at layer 4. So we've done a little bit of magic behind the scenes to define two different types for the generator, which have slightly different schemas. So basically, TCP proxy, you can't say things like what path am I going to probe. That's just not a thing. So yeah, that's going to be in 1.2. Now, is there, James, Nick, is there anything else that I've missed? I'm sure there's stuff that I've missed.
There were a few. I think there were a few bug fixes, but nothing huge. A couple of things like the certgen job now correctly will succeed if the secrets already exist. So, and Steve has also made a change a while ago so that the certgen job, if you're running a more recent Kubernetes, will be deleted. Basically, that just removes a blocker for people just reapplying the YAML over the top of the old one. And we fixed a couple of other things too.
Oh, James, this is the short log. I wish GitHub would generate this directly. This is fabulous.
I always just have it. Normally when I do a release, I do a script which slams the short log into the tag, which is useful. But the short log's great. I think there's a lot of sort of bug fixes and cleanups in this release. And in general, we have this little sprinkling of small quality of life improvements. So I think it's a nice release. Generally seems pretty low risk, nice benefits.
I think the one thing else that we've added, or is in flight, hopefully we get it finished, is the ability to roll out an Envoy cleanly. So today, when there's a pull request for, I just finished up the review from James and Nick, but we've added this new command to Contour called the Shutdown Manager. And the idea is that when you roll out a new Envoy, the problem is that there could be active connections to those listeners. So we need a way to have you be able to roll that Envoy after draining connections. So this helps you assist with that. And there's a bunch of docs and stuff on it, but hopefully this gets into the 1.2 as well. So when you need to upgrade Envoy, which is going to happen here soon in March, you'll be able to do that without having to lose connections.
So previously we did this with just a terrible combination of bash, right? It was to kind of like curl an endpoint on Envoy. Pretty sure I made some horror show about that.
It was pretty fancy bash.
It was the wrong tool in the wrong place. But yeah, so the idea is to connect the shutdown signal that the kubelet sends to the pod to Envoy to say, actually, please go and drain yourself. Don't just sit quietly until you're murdered.
Yeah, I mean, I think Steve, if you wanted to briefly explain it, your diagram that you've got in there is actually really good.
Yeah, I was just pulling that up here. Yeah. Can you all see that diagram there?
Yep, that's pretty good.
Okay, cool. So the idea here is that, like Dave mentioned before, we created a readiness probe on Envoy, and Envoy itself has a health check fail endpoint. So what we would do is on a pre-stop hook, we would call that health check fail to Envoy. So Envoy would start draining connections, and then the readiness probe in Kubernetes would look at that probe and say, oh, it's failing because now it's unhealthy, and would take that pod out of service. So then no new connections should route to that Envoy. All the while, connections will start to drain. The problem we had was we didn't have any way to know, are all the connections gone yet or not? So this is the idea of the shutdown manager. So the idea is that this top part is just the liveness probe. We can skip that. So here's what happens. So Kubernetes is going to say, hey, kubelet, go destroy this pod. This pod needs to terminate. The kubelet will then hit the pre-stop hook on Envoy. And then the shutdown manager will also get that same hook. And it'll say, okay, Envoy, go start draining connections. And that's this arrow here going left. So at that point, Envoy will be unhealthy, and then it'll fail its readiness probe. So it'll get taken out of service. So no new traffic should be directed to that instance of Envoy. So now Envoy's starting to drain connections. And then what happens is the shutdown manager is going to poll here. So there's a configurable time. It'll go and poll and look for open connections on all the listeners. In our case, for Contour, it's only an HTTP and an HTTPS listener. So it's going to poll and look for, again, a configurable amount. So maybe for you in your environment, 1,000 connections is a low number, or maybe 0 is a good number. So it'll continue to poll for those connections to be drained. Once it hits that mark, it'll then send a response back to that pre-stop hook that happened up here. And that tells the kubelet, hey, I've drained everything. I'm done all my cleanup. Go ahead and terminate me. And then the kubelet will terminate. Now, in the event that this doesn't happen fast enough, so you can configure basically this termination grace seconds for the pod. So you can define basically how long you want to wait for that pod to stay around while it's waiting to drain. So maybe for you, that might be 5 minutes, that may be a half hour. I actually don't know what the max is in Kubernetes to set that to. But that's going to be your max window. So either your open connections is met, or that termination grace period gets met, and then the pod will get terminated. And then the next one will roll. And the idea here is to be able to define, how you're going to wait for these connections to drain. And that's kind of the idea. Does that make sense, folks?
Yeah, thanks for the rundowns. The shutdown manager, that's a container that runs within the Contour pod?
It actually runs alongside Envoy.
Okay.
Yeah, so Contour and Envoy in our default model now they're split. So Envoy runs as a daemon set, so one instance per node, and then Contour runs as a deployment. Yeah, so the shutdown manager's job is just to implement that polling logic there. And it's written as a command off of the Contour binary. So it's the same Contour container, which is the different command that it gets run, just for simplicity. So we don't have to push and manage this whole other container or image.
Assuming it uses a lot less resources since it does a little bit different job than the Contour binaries, right?
Yeah, all it's running is just a small Go HTTP server is all it's running. So it's very minimal, yeah.
I mean, it is the same binary. It's built into the Contour binary, however. It's not. We're not shipping a brand new binary for this.
Yes.
This makes me think of a problem that we've been trying to solve. Micaiah and I could use your help explaining this in more detail since you've been leading the effort. Is kind of those the graceful, I forget what is it called, graceful upgrades, or the challenge that we have where upgrading our Ingress controller from one version to the other, or what is it called, hitless upgrades? Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's usually what people call it. Yep.
We can call it zero downtime, but yes, same idea.
Yeah, happy to chat more, whenever about this.
So I mean, that doesn't really occur for. I mean, the problem doesn't really occur for Contour because Contour itself is a separate deployment than Envoy.
Yeah, and so as long as we drain the envoys successfully, it's fine. And if you're using a Contour with the leader election, then usually, as long as you roll the contours one at a time, like usually the amount of time that it takes to roll a thing is enough time for Contour for a new Contour coming up to fully initialize its caches and stuff. So that there is a bit of a raciness around config that's possible, but as long as
I don't like leader election does not play a part in that anymore.
Yeah, so the point that I'm making is that there's no raciness if you use leader election. Is the point that I'm saying, is that because as long as when you do a deployment update, it'll by default roll them one at a time, the way we've configured the deployment. So you won't have to worry about that, and that means that you will get a hitless upgrade because the Contour control plane will roll when it's ready. And now with this Envoy change, then the Envoy control plane will roll one at a time and won't drop connections while it's doing it because it'll put them into draining mode.
Yeah,
that sounds similar to what we're doing, but we're still. Micaiah, am I missing something here? It sounds similar to what we're doing, but we still see the hits happening.
Probably better to talk about that this another time.
Yeah.
So one interesting wrinkle with this is the contour image is now in 2 places. I guess it was always in 2 places, right? It was always, the image was always associated with the Envoy deployment and the contour deployment.
Yes.
So if you change your contour image and you're rolling out a new contour image, you might want to orchestrate that so that it rolls out to contour first and then Envoy second, or whatever is appropriate, right?
Yeah, I think in those ones we actually do set it to latest, as opposed to pinning the version like we do in the contour deployments. I think that's the big changes for 1.2, Dave.
Yep, cool. All right, let's move on. The next thing, which I admit I copied over from the previous meeting notes. Michael, is there anything we should discuss about the CNCF donations?
No, not yet. So the TOC kind of canceled their meeting today, and then what do you call it? I know Daniel, you comment on the PR. I made the 2 changes you asked for. We're meeting SIG networking on Thursday, so we should hopefully get someone that's going to be in charge of doing this with us. So far, we haven't been able to pinpoint someone. So hopefully this happens. I've made terrific progress on Harbor in the last week. So Harbor finished 1 out of the 2 SIG reviews, and the second, actually we finished 2 out of 2, but the second one didn't merge its PR. So now I'm able to actually go back to the same folks and ask for more resources for Contour. So yeah, I've been a big pest across the board with CNCF. So this is hopefully going to pay off, but we should know more this Thursday.
Yeah, and I would think the SIG networking contact would be Bowie or Tim Hawk, and I know Bowie is well aware of all the involvement and the plan for Contour to support Ingress V2.
Yeah, and this is Michael. You were talking about the CNCF SIG networking, though, right?
Yeah.
Not the Kubernetes one.
Yeah, not the Kubernetes SIG networking, the CNCF. So that's basically even busier, folks.
Yeah.
It turns out that naming things isn't hard just for programmers. It's also for people that run their own working groups.
Yeah.
Okay, what I might do for the next, let's call it 10 minutes, see how we go. Nick and the Red Hat folks, like, shall we talk about service APIs? What's happened so far, and what's perhaps how the stuff upstream potentially feeds back into Contour? Because I know that service APIs is a part of upstream SIG networking that is moving quite rapidly.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start then. So the in case there's anyone watching this who doesn't know already, the service APIs is the sub-project of SIG networking to build a replacement for Ingress, a next generation Ingress. That it's going to cover a lot more use cases than Ingress, so that's why it looks. Shape of it is a bit weird if you're used to looking at a single document that is Ingress. I think where it's at the moment is we're still working pretty hard to sort of define a lot of the sort of the really basic functionality and how it will work and how the different constructs hold together. Where the important part for Contour is that I want Contour to be able to consume these types as soon as possible. So to that end, I've been working on bringing just the basic wiring for the types into Contour as soon as possible behind a experimental flag. I actually have a PR for that ready to go. That's been approved. We're going to hold off on that until after 1.2, so it will come in 1.2.1, so it will come in as part of 1.3. But yeah, the idea here is that then once I do that, then if you are running Contour master or Contour 1.3 when it comes out, you'll be able to pass a -- experimental service APIs flag that if you have the service, that then will expect the service APIs objects to be installed in your cluster. And currently all it will do is record that it has seen the objects. But the whole idea here is to just wire everything up so that that wiring is ready for us to add further logic in once we get to the point of actually having logic defined by the service APIs project.
Build that foundation.
yeah, so I mean, it's pretty exciting that I think we're going to be the first Ingress controller to have any support for this, at all, even if it is super basic right now, because the objects are just not. I mean, practically the objects are just not ready for anyone to actually implement anything against them yet. But having this wiring done now means that as the objects get more ready, it's just a matter of updating go.mod and then bringing the logic into Contour to actually handle however the APIs end up being defined.
Nick, really quickly, would the default Kubernetes Ingress not have support for this right off the bat?
So no. So the whole idea of this project is that it will produce a set of CRDs that have extra functionality, but they will not be included in Kubernetes by default. You will need to install them separately in order to access this functionality. This is the sort of the new model for extensions to Kubernetes going forward. That the core is sort of close to unmanageably large as it is, and so there is a separate effort that James is working on from the Contour team to bring Ingress to a GA object instead of being a beta object. And there's a few extra fields added and some other stuff that James can probably talk more about. But I think we're waiting there for that spec to be accepted and for those changes to be moved in. And then at that point, we will move Contour to using the to wanting to use the GA Ingress object, but supporting the other ones. I think Dave and I have talked about this a lot, but I think that one of the things that we really want to do for Contour is that we want Contour to be, we'll take your Ingress config no matter where you've got it from. Or as I like to say it, we don't care who you are, where you're from, or what you did, as long as you're Ingress.
I'll take that. That should be our new mission statement.
Yeah. So so that's just the idea, is that we'll support anything that we can that configures a reverse proxy to do ingress to a Kubernetes cluster, no matter where those objects are from or what they do. As long as we can squish them all into the same Kubernetes cluster, and there's no name conflicts or something like that, then we will look at adding support for it. So if you have something you want us to add, then please log an issue.
Yeah, it's important to remember that Contour currently supports 4 different Ingress objects. The two flavors of V1 Beta 1, Ingress Route, which is going away probably in June, and tcpproxy, which is the replacement for that. And we fully expect Ingress V1, as soon as it's verified, we're going to support that, as well as our commitment to SIG networking is that we will be the test bed for V2, obviously with the right kind of minus experimental extension. But the best way to know these things are going to work, like this is the Ingress V2 stuff, is very it's not an evolution, it's a revolution of the way that networking, especially external facing networking, is thought of in Kubernetes. And the best way to know this is going to work is to actually scratch and sniff it and try it. So that's where we hope the Contour can contribute to the community there. Cool. And just I put a link, just for the PR voyeurs in the room, I put a link to the Ingress V1, which is not Ingress V2, the Ingress V1 graduation PR, which, I don't know, where are we in the Kubernetes cycle? They're closing in on 1.19, so I guess like 1.20 or something like that, when that will actually happen.
18 I think is still coming, but
this isn't going to land in 18.
No, it'll be 19.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to say is that we know it's coming, we're tracking it, and there's a little bit of kind of like juggling of like, there's no point in doing any work until like the actual bits are available upstream. So we're very much waiting on, apart from being aware that we want to do this work, we're not going to jump the gun. Okay, let's move on to other business. I don't think Tara is on the call today. Can someone give a quick overview? So someone who is helping him land his work. I know there are 2 parts. There is the Contour side and the Envoy side, which is not quite going so well.
Yeah, I can give a bit of context here. So the end goal of this work is for a site to be able to implement, for a site to be able to rotate the certificates that are used to secure the communication for the XDS channel between Contour and Envoy. And you'd be able to rotate those certificates and everything would continue working. So in theory, the goal is for this to be an automated or automatable system. So on the Contour side, the change for Contour to automatically pick up new certificates has landed. So that will be in the next Contour release. The Envoy side of it is still in progress. Envoy uses iNotify to detect changes to files, and the way it drives iNotify is defeated by the way Kubernetes constructs config volumes. So when Kubernetes updates the certificates, the iNotify watch that Contour has isn't triggered because it's still watching the old files. So there's talk upstream. I think Matt Klein's just engaged on that PR. So, I think it's making progress, but it's going to take some time.
You may have to URL hack. So I think the answer is there. We all want this feature. We're still working on it. It's if Envoy, I mean, this seems like a kind of a larger problem than just our requirement. If Envoy kind of has trouble with the way that Kubernetes writes out files to temporary volumes, this seems like it would impact a lot of people using Envoy as a product, like in all of their kind of config reload type things. So I suspect this will probably be fixed, but yeah, no answers at the moment. Any questions from anybody who wasn't on the call last week about why we're doing this and where it's going, or pretty straightforward? Cool. Steve, could you flick back over to the notes? Thank you. What I might do, we're doing pretty good on time, so I'm just going to, I'll just talk about the one last thing on the agenda, and then I'll throw it back over to Steve, and then we can have some open discussion. I said that we're pushing for 1.2 by the end of this week, and part of that is to keep our regular release train. Another is to create a couple of weeks of free air between getting everyone up to 1.2 and the inevitable Envoy CVE, which is coming out, which is going to be a new version of Envoy shipped on the 3rd of March. That was disclosed a couple of days ago. And because of that, we have to ship a version of Contour so that we update the manifests to point to this new version. And also, it is rare, but not unheard of. It's happened about, I think, twice over the history of the project that we actually have to change Contour to work with whatever is fixed in the new version of Envoy. So just letting you know that there will be a patch release to Contour 1.2 coming on the 3rd of March, which will also require an Envoy update. But that's why we want to get all the code changes in your hands a couple of weeks beforehand, like basically the end of this week, so that you can upgrade. We don't want to put you in a position where you have to upgrade to a new version of Contour and potentially have incompatibilities or things that would mean that you can't use that version, but also in a situation that you must use a new version of Envoy. So just giving a bit of prior warning there. And with that, I will link the milestone. I'll edit the notes to link the milestone. With that, I'm going to take the rest of the time. I'm going to hand it over to Steve, who can talk about the Contour code overview. And if this is for everyone on the call. This is your time to ask questions, ask clarifications.
One more thing that I wanted to mention.
Of course.
Sorry, David. We're going to basically update the community meeting for Contour now that we're having more and more contributions, including from Red Hat. We're going to meet weekly, but we're going to make it a little bit different since we have folks all over the globe. We're going to have 1 week that's going to be in a time zone that's friendly to US, Eastern, as well as European time zones. And then we're going to have a second meeting time that will be the same slot as this one that's not as friendly to folks on the East Coast, or definitely not for Europe, but friendly for Australia as well as West Coast. So that's coming up. We will I'm thinking that we're gonna update our meetings, and the first iteration will be next week. So it's gonna give us a lot more touch points with the community and everyone that's working on Contour. I think we'll still be set to 1 hour, but very likely we'll end early. So we'll just have the hour reserved just in case. But overall, it's gonna facilitate faster cadence in collaborating on the project.
This sounds great. In terms of setting the meeting, finding good times in the day, are you just going to make an arbitrary decision, or how could we collect feedback on what times work for people?
We actually picked the times already, and
Jonas, there's no work to do.
And Jonas is sick right now, so I'm trying to see if I can find them on my calendar, really, on my email to him. But essentially, the one slot is the same one as this one, and the other one was early in the morning. I don't know exactly. I think it was like 12 noon Central, something like that, which was
okay. So afternoon for the European folks, early morning for the Australians, and midday. Yep. So right. we'll put them in the Slack channel. We'll put them in the meeting notes. We'll put them on the website.
Yeah. I'm hoping Jonas gets over the flu by the next day or so, and he'll update everything.
Cool. Yeah. So if you're interested in finding out more, the hash contour on the Kubernetes Slack is the way to find us. That's where we put all the information. Okay, Mr. Sloka.
Yeah, so I had some actually talking with Danon and some folks. I offered up some support to like walk through Contour, kind of how we built it, kind of where the components work from a code standpoint. We've all kind of done the intro to Ingress controllers and things over and over and over, but I think we've never really done this like, hey, how does the code work, to help someone maybe contribute back who's interested. So tomorrow we just picked the time, and this isn't good for the Australian folks, but I think you all know the code. But if anyone's interested, I guess what I'm saying is that at 2 o'clock tomorrow Eastern, I was going to walk through, some of the core components of Contour. How do we support Ingress route and proxy and all those different components? How does those objects flow into Contour? How does it then take them and do something with them? And then write feedback or write status back. So that's it. We'll make it freeform, whatever it is. If we need to schedule more, we can do that. Or maybe we can make this part of our community meeting, every week. Take a 10-minute walk through a component or something, if that makes sense. I don't know. So we'll try it and see.
Do you think we'll be able to post a recording of that? Maybe we can link it to these meeting notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once we record it, yeah, we'll upload it and get it. We'll be able to share that. Yeah, so we can share this in the notes. Yes.
That's right. I know that these things kind of tend to like age quite badly. So like a code walk from 3 years ago is not particularly useful, but it could have some short-term benefit.
Sure.
Sorry, I cut you off, James.
I was going to say, can you also send a meeting invite to the Contour Announce group?
Oh, sure.
People who are already subscribed on the community calendar will see the invite.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, this sort of popped up.
That's right. We have a mailing list, don't we, Michael? We have the Contour Announce mailing list. We should at least link it from the. I'll find out and link it from the notes. But yeah, again, this is another place that if you want extremely low volume, like literally here's a new release, here's community meeting stuff, period. It's another low volume way of keeping in touch with the project.
Yeah, I think the mailing list is a Google group.
It is, yes. So we'll take that on notice to figure out who created it, who composed to it, and we'll make sure that we send that information there. Okay, so we have some time really for any questions at all. This is Dana and Mika. If you have any questions at all, this is an opportunity to ask them. Or if there's anybody else on the call who I haven't previously introduced, if you want to, if you don't feel confident speaking on camera, just message me your question and I'll answer it if that's not your thing.
I do have a quick question on one of the topics that were covered is service protocol validation. I see that there's 3 valid strings, TLS, H2, H2C. I think I know what the first 2 are, but I'm not sure what H2C is. So I was just curious what that means.
Yes. Actually, I was going to say, but I was kind of involved guessing. James, it's derived directly from like some obscure point.
It's HTTP over
spec,
TCP.
right?
Sorry, yeah, it's HTTP2 over TCP. So no TLS.
Okay, yeah. So it's right. So it is not encrypted. It's not multiplexed inside of TLS frames.
And are these values defined somewhere?
They are defined.
They are the same values as we had in the annotation that we asked people to put on the service, right, Dave?
Yes, but where they actually come from, I'm going to say that they come from the Envoy docs, as they would have just been directly the fields. Now, perhaps to add some meta commentary, they are not the most friendly values. Let's be straight about that. So we could we perhaps we could add aliases, but I mean H2 is kind of quite straightforward. I mean HTTP2. Yeah. The H2C thing is I was going to say I don't think anybody implements it, but effectively as it's HTTP2 without encryption. Generally, most of the people who are doing HTTP2 implementations are like, we're not going to do all this work and not have encryption. So that part of the spec is kind of looked at as like, yeah, we'll get to it someday when I'll put it slightly lower than going on holiday. So it kind of exists as a thing, but doesn't. I've not seen a lot of use of it. I mean, we have tests that we emit that configuration, but it kind of exists because there are 3 options that were supported by Envoy. So we directly expose those as annotation names, protocol names.
So H2 and H2C are ALPN protocol names. TLS, I don't think is an ALP protocal name because I think the ALP, because obviously, I guess it can't be.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's summarize it and say not a great deal of thought was put into choosing the name. So perhaps one of the things that we could do to improve that is that we could create effectively aliases. So H2 could be alias to HTTP2. I don't know what to do about H2C. I don't think that's the biggest offender. TLS is probably fairly straightforward, but perhaps to answer the question you didn't ask, we could potentially. It's not a big deal to create more meaningful aliases. We can't remove the current ones. It's kind of back to the compatibility problem, but we could add better aliases.
Yeah, and I tend to just look at the Go docs of the API, and so even if it was just explaining what each of the values means, or if it comes directly from Envoy, just having a link that says for more details on any of these values, go to this URL.
Yep, I'm making a note that we can definitely like that. That's pretty straightforward to at least if we can't justify those names, at least link to a description of what they mean. So to help people like, okay, I don't understand what these 3 options are, but at least I can read the description of each of them and maybe I can choose them. Yeah, I'll take a note to do that. Okay, not a problem. Well, that's the end of the agenda. I'm just going to pause here for a little bit, and if there are no other questions, we may end a little bit early. 10 minutes early. So that's a good kind of speedy meetings type of time. Yeah. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming along. As I said, we'll be holding these more frequently. Michael will make sure that we publish the different dates and times we do about that. Do join Steve tomorrow for the code walkthrough. And with that, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all. Appreciate it, David, for running this.
Yep, not a problem. Thanks for coming. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Will you push the stop button, Steve?